On Tuesday, the governor of Maine, Paul LePage, am I pronouncing that correctly? The Republican governor in Maine claimed that new data released has exposed rampant abuse within the welfare system. What the data shows is that between January 1st of 2011 and November 15th of 2013, almost 2 years, there were approximately 3,000 transactions made at bars, sports bars, and strip clubs using EBT cash benefit cards. Although there was no tracking of what actually was purchased at those facilities, most are kind of assumed to be ATM withdrawals. The governor, Paul LePage, is using this as supposedly damning evidence of massive fraud within the system. But 3,000 was the number that emerged from 1.8 million total EBT cash card withdrawals within the same time frame. So out of 1.3 million, 3,000 transactions equals about 1/5 of 1% of all total transactions. LePage still asserts that this, quote, indicates a larger problem than initially thought. He is trying to paint welfare recipients as these wasteful spenders, but neither this study nor other studies backs up his claims. Families on government programs spend less than half of other families that aren't on government programs, and they spend a bigger portion of their budget on things like housing, food, and transportation. They are not wasteful spenders. They don't spend as much on entertainment and going out and so on and so forth. But the government of Maine has also claimed in the past that 40% of Mainers don't work, in spite of the fact that 65% are currently working or actively looking for work, while the rest are either retired, disabled, children, or students. He's also pushed for a 5-year cap on welfare, which has knocked 1,500 families off of welfare, affecting over 2,700 children, and causing them to lose assistance. And he's also made a controversial move of the DHH, or Department of Human Resources office in Maine, and he relocated that office to make it less convenient for poor rural families to actually get to the office and receive help.
This was a larger problem than what he thought. Really? Was it worried that it would be 1/2 of 1% instead of what he had originally found? Really? This dude hates poor people. I mean, just look at some of his actions, right, that he has taken that you've explained. Like, just moving the office so it's not accessible to poor people. Now, that's just a straight-up dick move right there. So, I mean, but when you get down to what he was saying is that, well, one of his aides had said, well, we're not uncovering anything new. Well, no shit. Anybody who knows human nature knows that there's going to be a couple of people out there that abuse the system, all right, in any system. But the vast, vast majority, as shown by this study, proves that, no, it's not the vast majority of people that are abusing the system. It's the vast majority of people that are actually benefiting from the system, using it as it's supposed to, getting off the system, and becoming independent, productive citizens once they've been able to pick themselves off the floor with their helping hand.
Yeah, no, I think Jeff really hit on it. I try to avoid the temptation, to say what's going on in someone's head. But it really seems, at least, from this is now admittedly out of the articles that we've read tonight, this is the one that I've researched the least. But it seems like from what we've got here, this guy hates poor people. Like Jeff is, there's just no other way to cut it.
You might not be able to go into people's heads and say what they think, but I can. And this man hates poor people. Okay, he hates poor people with a passion, and you can see it through his actions. You can see it through the way that he talks. Through the coded language, too, that, he and his office use when they talk about people that are on the welfare system. Oh, look at that, just that fraud and abuse. Oh, strip clubs, look at that. Those poor people are getting lap dances. No, that's not necessarily it.
Let me concede some of, the viable arguments before I just tear this guy a new one. All right, so some of them, they may be ATM transactions and they're not people ordering beer or, getting lap dances or whatever. That's true. However, let's keep it real. If you're at the strip club, you're probably not there to use the ATM.
No, I definitely agree.
And that said, even if it is an ATM withdrawal or whatever, maybe I'm being a fuddy-duddy here. But if you're strapped for cash, you don't need to be at the strip club anyway, man. Like, I'm not going to come down on you for going out to a restaurant every now and then. Human beings need a break. But, like, there's a difference between going and getting a meal, with your friends and blowing your money on strippers. And again, that's a tiny percentage. I'm not saying it's a specific problem, but we do have to acknowledge that there are anecdotes of this system being abused. But that's why they stick out, because they're anecdotes.
Exactly.
It's not the norm, so they're just glaring whenever we see them. And what you don't see is the PhD who's got a ton of kids and is happily married and trying to support his family having to depend on these kind of programs. What you do see is the guy blowing it at the strip club.
Or you don't even get to see I'm sorry to interrupt, but you don't even get to see the guy who's, working at McDonald's or whatever, who was laid off from his job during the recession and is working hard to support what he's got, or working wherever, and the wages just aren't enough to support his family, going on the system. Remember, there's a lot of people that are that are on these programs that work.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. For every example that you can give of someone abusing the system in some way, I can give you 10, 20, 100 examples of people that truly need it. And the thing is that anytime they make cuts, or anytime they make restrictions, or do anything that is a bad has a bad effect on the SNAP program or the welfare system, it doesn't affect just those few tiny number of people, 3,000 people nationwide out of 1.3 million transactions in almost 2 years. It doesn't affect them. It affects the people that need it. It affects the people usually who are on, especially on the borderline, who are usually, they say they're too poor to make it, but they're making too much to get any help from anyone.
And this is another example of where Republicans are not holding up to their own end of the bargain here, or to their own ideals, and to the line that we need to draw with Jeff's point of there's a difference in hating poverty and hating poor people. And I don't know, I think you could make a case either way about whether or not Republicans hate poverty or don't hate poverty. But it seems to be pretty clear that they hate poor people, and they're much more concerned about a war on poor people than a war on poverty. So you've got this study comes out and shows, what we've all known, that by and large, these programs are not being abused. There are abuses in them that we can work to stop, and we should. We owe it to the people who really need it to do that. But just like the mandatory drug testing for welfare recipients is big. In Florida they passed that, and then it comes back that 2% of welfare recipients have tested positive, which is about 1/4 of the national average of drug use. Yeah, and they spend more money on the drug test than what they gained by taking these people off of government assistance. It's just there's no compassion in it. There's no logic behind it. There's literally no reason for this kind of stuff. But it feeds into this rhetoric. They take this data and they twist it and they misrepresent it and make it say what it actually doesn't say, and then they go, yeah, see, we were right, and it doesn't make sense. 8.7%. That's it. 8.7% of the population uses drugs. 2% of the welfare population. Less than a quarter.
Yeah, here's an important thing too that you need to ask people like Paul LePage that are like they hate welfare, right? And they hate like people abusing welfare. Well, okay, so if you're so worried about welfare, Paul LePage and Tea Party, then maybe you guys should stop blocking investigations of fraudulent bankers and throw them in jail.
Right.
That's the biggest example of welfare I think that we have.
See, I'd go so far to say that Republicans hate poor people, but actually don't hate poverty at all. I think they actually like poverty, because as long as poverty is in place, they have a large pool of increasingly uneducated, desperate, starving, poor people that will take whatever job they throw at them at whatever rate, and they won't complain because they need this job and they can't afford to lose it. So,
and you've also got the you can foster that us versus them mentality too, because now you have a group of people that are pliable, and that you can tell them, hey, you see that poor dude over there? He's taking your money.
Absolutely,
he doesn't deserve it. He doesn't earn it. You know what I can do for you? I can get rid of that.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. They're an easy group to scapegoat because they can't defend themselves. You know, they don't have the money to put up their own advertisements and put up, you know, propaganda against rich people and how they're demonizing the poor.
Yeah, I can take your money away from that poor person and give it to my rich donor.
Yeah, and
right.
Here's
If Republicans actually cared about free money being given away to people, then what they would be against is what they're getting, which are corporate subsidies and corporate welfare and, you know, all these handouts and bailouts that they and their constituents and their campaign donors are given every single day in excess of what is given into the welfare industry. There's more money spent on oil subsidies and defense contractors and corporate subsidies and so on than spent on the welfare system that goes to helping poor people and people that actually need it.
Yeah, and it goes back to the one of the better points is that Republicans hate the war on poverty because they love poverty. They love it because they can. It's a political winner. It's such a good political divisive issue that they can use to whip up popular support to get them elected. You think Paul LePage didn't get into the office because of his grand ideas on how to make Maine a better state. He got into office because he was campaigning against the welfare queens. We have went back in time to Reagan. We are now still using that mythological welfare queen argument, and people across the country, politicians across the country, are still willing. They're still winning on that platform.
It's like a Republican's view of fighting poverty is beating up poor people. It's like going into a cancer ward and saying, I'm going to fight cancer, and you just go beat the shit out of some cancer patients.
That's pretty apt. That's a pretty apt comparison. Like, and you could go back to that guy who was trying to fight homelessness by bashing in homeless people's carts.
Yeah.
We should point out the guy that did that.
He was a Democrat.
So
he was a Democrat.
It cuts both ways.
Yep.
The fact of the matter is there is a segment of the population that froths at the mouth and just loves getting worked up about how hard they've worked for what they've got and how hard or how much everyone else beneath them has it. And it's not just rich people that do it. It's as soon as you get to this station in life, then
the $50,000 a year crowd.
Yeah, then as soon as everyone underneath you is a lazy bum. And we're so quick to forget where we came from. But
there are plenty of studies that show that the richer you get, when you get rich, you become more of an asshole. Not in every circumstance, of course, but there are studies that show that it doesn't even have to be real money. They've done this study with Monopoly. They give one guy starting out all the breaks, like a lot of extra money, more than everybody else, and then the guy wins the game and he's a dick while doing it.
Yep, he suddenly feels entitled.
Yeah, what are you talking about? I won the game because I was better than you. No, you had a huge advantage from the get-go.
There's some reforms that need to be made. There are some abuses that need to be stopped. But what we have to remember as a people is that the people who benefit most from these programs, the children, have no say in the abuses that may or may not be committed. And when we take the money away, we take it away from them. every bit as much, if not more, than we do from the people abusing the system. And it seems to me that is a judgment call that if we have to make, you've got to choose the people who aren't guilty over the people who are every single time.
Absolutely. If you're truly an empathetic and compassionate person, then you will hold to the notion that helping the people that need it is more important than trying to stop the meager few that will try to take advantage of the help that is given. It is more important that the people who need it get it.